Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. This is Season 10, Episode 3. Today I'm very honored to be talking to Abi Balingit, whose new book, Mayumu, is out actually today. And I'm really honored to be able to have a chance to talk with her. She is a local person who is from my local area in the San Joaquin Valley, and now she's living in New York, in Brooklyn, and she's works in the music industry, but she writes by night. Her website, the Dusky Kitchen, and creates all the recipes for it. And she's been writing for the past couple of years her new cookbook, which is inventive takes on traditional Filipino cuisine, and it's amazing. It's a beautiful cookbook, and I really hope that you go out and check it out and purchase a copy. It's also available to be purchased through all major retail outlets and in all better bookstores. Again, I had a really good time talking to Abi. She was so fun and just a great guest. So I want to go without further ado to that interview. I'll take you there right now. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. I'm very happy and honored today to have on my podcast Abi Balingit, who has a new cookbook out called Mayumu, out this week. Abi, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Dean. Thank you for having me.
Now, the first thing I like to ask everybody, because I always think this is such a fun question, and I'm always interested about it, is: did you have any food mentors growing up that instructed you on how to cook or bake as you grew up?
Honestly, I think, my parents, they've definitely cooked for me and they definitely fed me very well growing up. But I don't necessarily think they ever really sat me down and taught me things. I was also just I feel young and naive. I left home when I was 18 to go to college to UC Berkeley. And I kind of just up until that point, I really wasn't asking as many questions as I wish I did about how to cook things. But I do think in their spirit and obviously their palate and whatever they ate, I think it just came over to me. So and they trained me in taste and flavors, and I think that's the most important thing. At a point where I feel a lot of immigrant parents, a tendency to also just be a little bit of this or a touch of that, and it's not necessarily straight up measurements, but the vibes, they were transferred to me.
You grew up, as you said, in San Jose, and you went to school at UC Berkeley. How did growing up in the Bay Area influence your love of food?
Yeah, I mean, so I lived in San Jose until I was 6 years old, and then I moved to Stockton, which is only an hour drive from San Jose. But I still continue to spend a lot of time in San Jose because my extended family on my mom's side was just still all living there. But I am very grateful for just always having a lot of diversity of food around. I think San Jose is so well known for the Vietnamese food is amazing. But also just Filipino food is, just everywhere. And especially in Stockton, where I guess I spent most of my adolescence and childhood there actually. It's just you're around so many different people. So I always never felt it wasn't always In-N-Out burgers and fries, which I do love In-N-Out burgers and fries, but it's
Yeah.
very much there's a lot to eat, and there's so much I think of just culture and community growing up in those places.
Now, it's funny that you mentioned Stockton. I didn't know that in your bio. I'm actually living in Mountain House near Tracy.
Oh, okay, yes, the 209. I know Tracy very well
Yeah.
because you can always just drive through, and there is a Nations and an In-N-Out, and that trifecta of random places that you would stop by on the highway to get back to my parents' house. But I no, it's great. I mean, it's so different again, living in New York and then thinking about life in California for sure.
Is there anything that you're craving in New York? I mean, you get great food in New York. You probably don't get here, but is there anything you're kind of missing living on the East Coast?
I mean, I think I still miss a lot of things. I mean, you could still, sometimes get similar, obviously, offerings, but I think there's Senior Seasick, which is a chain from started in the Bay Area. There are little food trucks and SF, and even I think at brick and mortar places now too. But I'd always get their sisig burritos, and also if you, especially since you live kind of close to Tracy, there's Papa Herbs Grill, which is another Filipino place that also specializes in kind of the fusion sisig combos of like savory Filipino food, which both things I do miss. I would go and go with my family or go with my friends to go to both those places.
I'm going to be checking that out very soon. Thank you for the recommend.
Yeah, I'm so happy to like give all my recommendations. I'll live vicariously through you, Dean. It'll be great.
I can send you I'll send you a burrito in the mail.
Oh my god. Okay, the shipping, it might be a little dicey, but I will accept it.
Is there anything you're getting in New York that you didn't have here that's kind of a revelation for you?
Honestly, I think first thing obviously that comes to mind is always like bagels and like really really good pizza. But I feel like I don't know. It's going to a lot of like Jewish delis. I think I've never had this like much arugula and like babka and like all these like really great like pastries, and black and white cookies are like, kind of like a mainstay here. And I still like really gravitate towards them just out of like novelty of like, oh, this is so new to me when I first like moved, but it's everywhere. Like you go to like any like kind of like bodega or like bagel store or something, and they'll have like all those things just on the side for you to order too.
You work in the music industry, and how is this job different from your cookbook writing and your food blogging?
I think there's so much that's super super different. But I will say if there's anything, like I think that like when you're baking and you're like posting online about what you're making, inherently it's kind of like a lot of like social marketing, and email copy and email marketing, which I kind of do at my day job. I do think about a lot just sometimes when I'm like posting myself on my like baking feed and everything for the Dusky Kitchen. But obviously like the practices are so different. I think creatively, like I'm not the one performing music. I wish I were. I'm not talented in that sense, but for like baking and everything, that is definitely like more of like a creative outlet for me. When I'm actually in the kitchen and when I'm actually just like talking about whatever the recipe background or where this came from, it is really kind of special to kind of tap into that part of my brain where I feel like my day-to-day job is kind of like there's set goals, and obviously like you have to make X amount of sales per month of like concert sales and ticket sales. So it's just like different, super different, but obviously I take away a lot from both aspects of my life.
How hard did the quarantine impact the music industry? I mean, I see that it was fairly devastating. A lot of musicians were really hurt by it. Was it as bad as we think?
Yeah, it was really bad. And that's even coming from just like this, like my company is kind of like an interesting kind of part of the ecosystem where you see all sides of it, because we promote shows to like fans, but also like we host a lot of like tools and widgets for like artists, and promoters and venues. So like everyone was like affected, especially just by like, yeah, just like the pandemic was just really exposed a lot of things that were already kind of like like fragile. But the inability to have in-person events just decimate a lot of like people's industries, and especially for touring artists where I feel like we have a lot of empathy for. It's just like it's hard to not have your mainstream income anymore and to kind of like rely on live streams, and not and just kind of like finding new ways to connect with your fans and everyone else was something we were all just trying to like pivot with. And I'm really glad that the past year we've been really lucky where things have kind of like jumped a lot, and like this is probably the most like kind of activity I've seen in like 2 years, or even pre-pandemic. I feel like people are out and about, really excited to go to shows, and that really like makes me happy, and I'm glad that we can bounce back a bit. But that was definitely just like, very hard for everybody, and I'm just hoping that doesn't happen again. Prayers and just like
Yeah.
I'm glad to be in this new stage of life.
Yeah, thank God. My wife and I went to a rockabilly show a few months ago, and it's the first time we've been out, I think, in a couple of years. And it feels like you're coming out of a bunker, going out into the real world. It's weird.
I know. I feel like no one knows how to kind of like, it's just like a new normal, like unprecedented times as usual. But it is, a relief to be able to like have that kind of fun time with like your friends and your family, as, everyone enjoys going to shows. And I think there's nothing that really replicates that. And live streams are fun and intimate, but I think it's like a different kind of fun and, like one-to-one kind of interaction when you're actually at a show.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can get to go to some more shows this year. I'm really looking forward to that. Your food blog is called Dusky Kitchen. Now, I love the story of how you came up with the name. Can you share that with our listeners?
Yeah, yeah. So like I had plans to start this blog like way before the pandemic. Well, not really way before, maybe just like December 2019, really. And I always thought of like how the only time I had to bake was like after work. And so I used to commute from like Midtown Manhattan to my apartment in Bed-Stuy. And so the only time, coming off the train was basically dusk, like towards 6:37 kind of a thing. And so it'd always be kind of like dusky in the kitchen. And also I only have like one window in the kitchen with my roommates that we all share. So I think it was just more of like a fun play on like both like, the time of day when I would bake and also just like what the atmosphere honestly most of the time is in like a very dark kitchen.
Now, you said in your blog introduction that you have a love-hate relationship with baking. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything that you try or like a hobby that you end up loving, I think you all also, it takes a lot to get good at something. And like for baking, I'm always kind of like humbled truly by like, even though you've done something 10 times, there's always like, there's always a possibility, like a 1% chance that you might mess something up, honestly. But at the other flip side of that, I feel like there's the other chance that you're actually going to get better each time. And I think it's like a skill that kind of gets, better with use and practice. And I love, I think I love like the experimental aspect of being in the kitchen and baking. And I think the frustrations of just like not getting it right on the first try is like what I was talking about there. And I'm just like perfectionist, honestly. I'm also an Aries. I don't know if that even matters, but like I think it's like kind of like my kind of attitude is to be like, I want to do this right or not at all. And, it's not always like that clean cut and you do kind of have to do it wrong to understand how to get it right. But that's kind of like what I meant. But I love it overall, but obviously I hate aspects of it, like washing dishes and trial and the error part of the trial.
No, I totally understand. I'm an Aries too, and I totally got that on. That's why I wanted to talk about it because I'm like, I understand you. I get it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like whatever the driven or whatever aspect of, like headstrong, like ram aspect of being an Aries, like I feel that in different ways of my life. Hopefully not like all the time, like super intense, but more just like really wanting to, yeah, just like prove myself right. I don't know.
Well, it's funny because you have pictures of your stuff on social media and on your blog, and your bakes are really beautiful. And I think that there's a really emphasis on the visual aspect of that in your bakes. It's really impressive work. But I have to ask, if New York kitchens are as small as San Francisco kitchens, how hard is it to do all that?
Oh my god! I mean, I would say yeah, very equally small. Like I really, it's like it is difficult. And I think some people are luckier than others, and I consider myself pretty lucky. I live in Bed-Stuy, which more so I feel like the trend of like really, really, really tiny apartments are even like, or I mean, at least even kitchens in that, like like the ones where it's like a quarter of a burner and like half the size of a regular oven. I think that's like mostly in like Soho or like somewhere in like Manhattan usually. But I think that like those challenges of just like kind of like, obviously if you live with other roommates too, I feel like that's very common both in New York and San Francisco. It's like learning to kind of like share a space is kind of just like it's different dynamics and chemistry with the people that you actually live with at any given time of your lease is up or whatever. So I think navigating, just like, okay, this is like the schedules that everyone has, but also just like, okay, this is my space, this is your space, this is our space. Like honestly, making boundaries like that has, always helped my apartment situations out. But I think it's kind of just like being creative, honestly, with whatever space that you have. And so it was a challenge to like develop a cookbook and to just bake in general in like a small space. But I still think it's like so doable. And I hope a lot of people still, try to bake, even if it's not necessarily the most ideal kitchen situation that you have.
In doing my research, I had a really wonderful story that I saw. It talked about you raising money and awareness for national and local causes through your Pasulabong dessert boxes. I hope I got that right. Can you tell our audience about this and what exactly these dessert boxes were, what they had in them, what you put inside them?
Yeah, so like my pasalubong boxes, they're basically just like little treat boxes that I came up with in the pandemic, where there's like just like 6 kind of like fusion desserts in them, like traditionally, and then I would just sell them and then like donate all those proceeds to any mutual aid funds in my network or like in the neighborhood. And so like I mean to date, like including like other fundraisers I've done, I've pretty much like raised almost like or almost $14,000, a little bit under that.
Wow.
Yeah, so it is kind of surreal because like all that, I didn't know like when I started out to do this that I would make so many desserts or like do all these things. But it's been nice to kind of like realize that like what you do, every dollar, every cookie makes a difference, honestly. And like there were so many people that like supported me and either wanted to try the bakes or even if it was like a raffle or something, if it wasn't necessarily the pasta lubang box, it was like maybe like a cake raffle for abortion funds. It was people still like wanted to support even if necessarily you wouldn't get a physical um dessert. Sometimes the guarantees weren't always like you would get one just because you saw it online, but there was definitely a lot of support on social media and just like everyone reposting, sharing, and that's why I'm really grateful for. It's just like I'm so proud of all the work that I've done so far, and I still continue to do all that work. It's just kind of like the frequency of that was kind of like it was peak pandemic time to kind of just bake and and be able to do that, versus now obviously still working full time, but everything has opened up and life has kind of just gotten busier somehow, but I still love the work that I've done with it.
Now this got a lot of notoriety on social media. What did you think all the feedback that you got about this?
Yeah, I mean, I hope it was all. I think it was all pretty positive.
Oh yeah, no, totally. It
I
was very positive.
I know. I was like, I feel like, oh no, like notoriety, but no, like I think like at least popularity or something. I literally would be like, oh, like set your alarms and stuff on online. I announce a box and things would sell out in like 30 minutes or like an hour, just like pre-orders and everything on a Google form. So I think the response was just great, just seeing it firsthand, but also just being able to see that like outside of New York, people still wanted to, try and support if they can, just with every single round of treat boxes that went out.
How did the quarantine inspire you to create your new cookbook? You have a new book out that, as of this
Mhm.
recording, will be coming out. It is the cookbook Mayumu. And can you tell us about this cookbook and how long you've been dreaming about it and thinking about writing it?
Yeah, so Mayumu Filipino American Desserts Remixed is coming out February 28th. And I think that this, I started blogging, I guess like summer 2020. And my now agent, literary agent Emmy, reached out to me over Twitter after seeing one of my bakes, and was like, hey, like, are you thinking of writing a cookbook? And this was like, I don't know, September, like 2020. So I really didn't have like many blog posts under my name or anything. And I really wasn't thinking of like writing a cookbook, honestly. That was never like on my radar. I've done like zines in the past, with some friends, like just like, you just print those out yourself and all. And so this is like a very different kind of endeavor, a bigger one, definitely in scale. But it was kind of like, like the vein of what I was already doing was like Filipino American fusion desserts. And that was kind of like, I want to do a whole book on that and talk about my life and kind of just like, both having like short stories and also having like the dessert recipes. I think this book is kind of like a reflection of just like who I am, but also just like different elements of, I it's not necessarily very traditional at all, but I think there are things that like people will remind them, or be reminded of, flipping through the recipes. So the quarantine itself was really like of all my like headspace and what I was thinking of during the time of like the peak of the pandemic. Obviously, I was missing my parents and missing my family. And my family is so spread out because of, Filipino diaspora is just so huge. Like I still have family still in the Philippines and I still have family like in California and I had family here in like New Jersey and like just like literally just every state, maybe there's like one family member I have, I don't know, but like it was really kind of missing the things that I grew up with and the food that I grew up with that influenced me to like write this book, and not being able to like visit as much as I wanted to or even being able to at all. I was still able to kind of like like mentally, and travel and just like in memories and kind of just like bake my way into like this, I guess, like, yeah, I was kind of like baking a part of everyone that I knew into this book. And I hope that wasn't like too wordy or spirally, but that's how it kind of feels in reflection of writing the whole thing.
This episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and their work, please visit their website at www.chnorcal.org. You have 75 flavor-forward recipes in this book. You have your own take on many traditional recipes. What was your inspiration for some of the flavor profiles in this book?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of like, I guess like when people think about Filipino food, I think, especially for desserts, I feel like people really think about like ube, pandan, a lot of like tropical flavors like mango, obviously. And I think that I obviously like, lean into those flavors a lot. But the cookbook also kind of like goes into other like American influences. And I think American, and it's hard to really describe what that is because I feel like that is so diverse to so many people depending on where you're living in this country. But I think for me, like, being American is just being such like it's very global in my mindset of just like, the diversity that is inherently like American to me can come from like different kinds of, cultures and traditions. And so like I definitely, in Stockton and in San Jose, I was always like kind of craving like mangonadas. I think you can also like chamango is also another way to like call it, but it's like things with just like it's like kind of like if you go to a paleteria, like a Mexican paleteria, you can get it, but it's kind of like the mango layered slushy with like chamoy, which is like this kind of like spicy, fruity, sour condiment, and then also just like it's like rimmed with like tahini, and then also like the straw is kind of like a candy, a tamarind candy, like wrapped around it. Those kinds of things, like I have like super vivid memories of always getting and trying. So I definitely incorporate that even in this like Filipino American dessert cookbook. There's just a lot more influences than just Filipino, but I think inherently it's fusion, and I think being Filipino, primarily myself, I think there's just definitely a heart of that adaptability of the cuisine that's in the book.
I grew up going to friends' houses and having Filipino food throughout my life, and I've been, kind of made aware of some of it, but like I haven't always been like aware. Like when I go to a restaurant, I don't always know what some of the foods are. What are some of your favorite foods from the Philippines, and what did you think you wanted to bring to the book about that, so people can learn more about Filipino food?
Yeah, I mean, I think luckily, like right before at the start of 2020, I went to the Philippines with my family to visit for my cousin's wedding, and there were so many things that I'm like, you not necessarily you can get here, but like there's certain like obviously like produce and everything is kind of just like different when you're actually in the country. But I loved like having like taho, which is like the silky tofu kind of dessert where it's like warm, and there's like vendors like everywhere just kind of like pouring like a brown sugar syrup and like sago, which is basically like tapioca pearls into the dessert. So like very like there's so many like little small things that are kind of like not necessarily like I guess you don't even have to go to like a sit down place to get, like because there's just stands and there's like people selling on the street. Those are kinds of things that like I love for people to try more of. Just like very casual Filipino food is really really good, and I'm sure like there's a lot of places that serve halo halo that are
Oh
in
yeah.
Filipino restaurants, and I love halo halo. It's like such a good like refreshing summer dessert, which like layered with shaved ice and ice cream and everything. And I think it's like really emblematic of like how I think about like Filipino food, because it is like a mix, which is exactly what like holo holo kind of means, of like all different textures and flavors, and like even just like the temperature of the dish, because it's as it melts it changes its flavor. Like there's so much there that I think that's kind of like how I approach Filipino food. It's just like so many influences, but also just like because like of the nature of everyone dispersing and like moving towards like literally just like the diaspora, there's just so much where I think there is enough of an influence everywhere where it's like Filipino food can exist everywhere because it's so adaptable.
So how has writing this cookbook been a window into your heritage and contributed to maybe some self-discovery? I know that everybody that I talk to who writes a cookbook says that it has an impact on their life. How has this impacted your life?
Yeah, I mean, I can't even begin to like mention how much it's like been great to kind of share that with my family first and foremost. And I don't think I didn't even like know that I would be able to like write a book, or like anyone would pay me to write a book really about like like our family history, like my like just like everything that I grew up with, the flavors and the ingredients and stuff. I never thought that that would be something that I would expound upon so heavily. But it's just kind of nice to use the book as kind of like a stepping stool to be like, oh, like I'll send in like family group chat like, hey, like you can pre-order the book now, or like come to my event in San Francisco if you can. And I think it's like a huge like way of like connection, in right now, like immediately, but also like I think just like generationally, like I really hope that like people pick up this book, even in my family, whatever, my nieces, my nephews, people younger than me. Like I think it's so, that's what's probably the most mind-boggling part about writing a book, is just like the foreverness of it. It's just like it'll always be there as like either a time capsule, but also just kind of like hopefully teaching future generations of how to make certain things. And I really encourage people to no matter like what a book's actual recipes are, I hope like the stories like stay and with people, even even if you not necessarily have the time to make this certain recipe today or whatever. But I think it's nice that it's just a reminder that it's like on the shelf and you can always pick it up and look at it again if you wanted to. So yeah.
I feel like there's been a growing awareness of Filipino food more recently, from just subtle impacts like Jollibee popping up everywhere and having like an influence on the pop culture. And then I'm seeing more restaurants. And then just like on social media, for instance, just about a month ago, actor Lou Diamond Phillips was making Sisig Live on like Twitter. So it was kind of interesting. I've been seeing these different things, like these touchstones here and there. Do you think there has been like a more growing awareness of Filipino food more recently?
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed it for like, I feel like ever since like it's so hard because I feel like obviously I've been around it my whole life. But I do know that there's just like a growing movement every day of people that are like making their own like takes on Filipino food, whether that's in restaurants or like bakeries, or even just like posting about it online, similar to like what I've been doing. Like I am really excited about that, and I think that it's it's so hard because I always feel like this is something that has always been going on.
Right.
But it is it's great to see that it's still picking up momentum no matter like where in the country. I think I'm really biased coastally just because I've lived on the west and the east coast, but I do see that there are there is demand, and there is like there are communities in the whole entirety of the United States, especially in like the Midwest and everywhere else, that I feel like the South, like all these places that I personally not have lived in, but like I read articles and I'm like, oh, there's a new restaurant opening up here, and there's like a Detroit, like I don't know, like just like a restaurant that I've never heard of. And I am always like excited about that. I'm always kind of like, it's almost, I feel like a bucket list of places I want to visit, just because of the Filipino restaurants like alone.
What was it like working with the publisher to make the cookbook? I know from the photos I've seen of you, you have a real keen interest in fashion and visual. And from your cooking,
Uh-huh.
like your bakes are very, very visual, very beautiful, and very artistic. Did you want to, because I know it's from the cover to the individual photographs in the book. Like the photograph on the cover is one of those knock your socks off image of a dessert that immediately makes you want it. So that's a really brilliant, I think, idea to hook people in and make them want to read the cookbook, because that cover image is so compelling. You're just like immediately like interested. You're like, what is that? How can I get that? So was that kind of, how much of your influence did you have on the cookbook, the visual aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, all of that, like, I was very lucky that my publisher, and my editor specifically, Sarah, she was always gung ho about anything that I wanted to put out. It was for me, like, before I even was making the recipes or, like, had a set table of contents, I was obviously worried about, like, it's, inherently fusion. And that also takes a lot more kind of explanation because a lot of these things are kind of like new or haven't been done in like this combination before. But everyone had faith in that, and I'm glad that they did because I truly am like really lucky with like even the team that I had put together. That was like my photographer Nico Shinko, my food stylist Katie Wayne, and her assistant Joy Cho, and my also like my prop stylist Mae Sheridan. Like all of these people are like professionals in their field. And when we did the cookbook shoot, I've never done a shoot of that scale before. And I was like, 60 recipes in 6 days is kind of like, like doesn't even compute in my head, like even to this day. But I think that like I always, I love color. I love, I just like love that like a lot of the recipes like reflect that just inherently and just how they were, like, that I made in my head. But because of like having this kind of team that just knows what they're doing, they like really, really like amplified that. Like the cover photo, that's a Holla Holla Baked Alaska. Like I had known, like I was like, I think this is like one of the star recipes in the book, and this is like very emblematic of like what I was thinking. And so like my food stylist Katie Wayne, she made two, and she made two of them, and made sure like we had a backup one. And I was really nervous on the day of, and I'm in the kitchen also making some of the desserts also, but like in terms of like touching up and making things look beautiful, beautiful. Katie was like all hands on deck, and I was like, I'm so scared to torch it, and I've torched it at home. Like I know how to torch it, but like having people there like comforting you and like being like, I have full confidence in your recipes. I know how it, the potential of how it could look. And yeah, it looks even better than when I was obviously testing in my home kitchen. And we ended up doing this whole shoot at my photographer's apartment. So Nico was really gracious to have like the whole, setup there. But yeah, I was so like just looking at the book today and looking at the actual physical pages of the photographs, and also my good friend from California, who I went to school with, Cherise Celestial. She did illustrations for my book, and so there's like some of those scattered in like in also like a sulfite acid heat style of like very small little illos. That really just it makes me happy. Like I look at it and it makes me like smile, and I think that's like a really good thing. And I am very lucky again that this is my first book, but I think this is exactly how I would have done any book if I had the chance. I don't know. Like I never like it was the vision that I wanted, and it's what came out. And I never, I in the beginning of this, I would never imagine it could like end up this way, but it did. It's better than what I imagined. So I'm really happy about it.
Now, to our listeners, we were talking about this earlier, but you just opened the book for the first time today, right?
Yes, yeah. So at this time of shooting, it's Monday, February 13th. Yeah.
Did you cry?
I cried. I mean, I was crying even when I saw like the boxes in the lobby. So there was like a
Yeah.
box of 18 copies and a box of 7. And the box of 7 I could carry and lift up my like walk up, but this box of 18 was very, very heavy. So I really was like, I took it to my boyfriend's apartment in like a lift, and he doesn't have as aggressive of a walk up as me. But yeah, just like seeing even like the color of the book through the tape, like it just there's so many aspects of the book journey that like I'm experience that just make things feel more concrete and real. But especially holding the book for the first time and seeing it, I think that's like one of those like really big milestones that I've just really lucky to experience.
Now, from your blog into your cookbook, I think you're a really good writer, cookbook, food writer, and a cookbook writer. And I really like the way you write. You have a very interesting style that's very much your own, and you have a good way of describing the process of cooking. Do you have any kind of food authors or food writers that are kind of your mentors or people that you thought of when you kind of wrote this, or your recipes for your blog?
Yeah, I mean, for all like one of the biggest inspirations, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, was like watching Claire Saffitz's show, Gourmet Makes,
Yeah.
on Bon Appétit. And I remember even making one of the like the Pop-Tart recipe and like submitting it to like BA and stuff, and like, oh yeah, like I made it too. And like, even reading like Dessert Person, and it's like a huge like staple on my like shelf. I am very inspired by like her technique and like her ability to make things digestible for everybody that who maybe has never baked at all. So I was really, she is like the inspiration for me for sure. But also like an element of just like Filipino history and like food and all that. I really like my good friend like Tina Makalintal, who is like a writer for Eater. I look up to her so much, and everything like she says, like I'm like, I agree, like 100%. Like, and I think she does talk a lot about the Filipino food movement, especially how it's like grown, and like her takes I really like take to heart. And so there's so much like good food writing out there, but I'm like really glad that I can, look at people who have now become my friends and be like, wow, your writing does inspire me a lot to like, write myself. So yeah, those are top two people I have in mind.
If you could pick a single recipe from the cookbook that you would want the public to try, what would you choose?
Mm-hmm. My favorite, well, I can't say favorite because all of them are my favorite.
Yeah, it's an evil question, I know.
I know, I'm like, it's like the King Solomon thing. I don't know, like, but I would say like, I hope people really, my one of the highlights of like recipe developing, I think, was like landing on the adobo chocolate chip cookie. And adobo is like one of the most common famous Filipino dishes that's like stewed, usually chicken, but it can be any protein in like vinegar and soy sauce. And so like the chocolate chip cookie is like, chocolate chip cookies are, as you know, chocolate, flour, eggs, all that stuff. But the butter is steeped in like, there's like bay leaves steeped in the butter. So it
Yeah.
gives off like that part of flavor. And then like the soy is like the salt in it, and a little bit of vinegar for just like activation of like baking soda, and also just like pink peppercorns on top, which are less harsh than like black peppercorns, which are usually like in Filipino adobo. But I love the color that's like on top, and also just like the mellow fruitiness that comes from like pink peppercorn. And so I think overall it's a very like, it's still a dessert, even though it's inspired by like a savory Filipino dish for sure.
I love that. I'm going to be trying that. That sounds really
Yeah,
delicious.
I'm so glad.
So, Abby, I know this is a kind of weird question considering all that's hitting you right now, but what's next for you?
I am gonna go actually back to California in late March and early April. So I will be doing like a book event in SF for sure, and trying to right now secure one in LA. But I'm excited to just, I don't know, like continue to like, promote the book, but also just like spend time with family and friends. So all those things happen all at the same time. But otherwise, still gonna do my job, my full-time job. I'm still gonna like, bake. I think it's just all those things. Like I have no idea how like the balance of that is gonna keep working out. But right now it's like I'm very what's it called? Cautiously excited about the future.
It's kind of a bipolar life right now for you, isn't it?
There's just a lot of, it is everything is kind of overwhelming, if there's anything a better way to say it. I just feel like, I don't know, there's just so much good, but also just so much like, I don't know, it's so, I feel very reflective at this point. Obviously being interviewed is one of those things that's like, oh yeah, like you're really making me think about this like the past couple of years. Not that I don't already, but I think what was really hitting me when I saw the galleys and stuff and the advanced copies is just, yeah, it's like years of work and years of your life, like even not just the writing process, not just like the proposal process, but like, like when I was 13 and I was baking in my kitchen, like I never thought that this would happen, and now it's happening. So I'm very appreciative of like the years of my life that have like led up to this point.
Well, Abby, I really want to congratulate you on the new book, and I hope to see you at one of the book signings when you come visit San Francisco.
Yeah,
Thanks for
please
being on
come
the
to
podcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, take care and appreciate your time.
That was my conversation with Abi Balingit. Her book, Mayumu, is out now. You can purchase it again through all better bookstores, online through major retailers, and you can also just go to the link in my bio. Next week, I have the honor of being able to talk to Jocelyn Delk Adams, whose book Everyday Grand is going to be out the following week. You may know her from her numerous appearances on television and her award-winning website and cookbook, Grandbaby Cakes. That'll be next week when I have Jocelyn Delk Adams on the podcast. Hope you're all having a really great week, and maybe you've made something interesting from some of the guests we've had on the podcast. Until you hear me next, keep on cooking.